So good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining our learning event, Learning Teams event today. I'm just going to take you through a few slides that explain how we develop the Learning Teams concept and the evidence that supports it. We'll then hear from three fantastic examples of forms of learning teams in practice. Next slide, please. So we had our early inspiration for this from the Education Commission's Learning Generation report in 2016, which made a recommendation to expand, strengthen and diversify the education workforce. This was inspired by the health sector's approach to workforce design, where a far more diversified workforce is deployed with distinct and recognised professionals, each with their own skills and training, that allows them to meet the needs of all their patients. And this has led to a more cost-effective workforce with improved health outcomes. The chart shows that in Chile, for example, there are 5 medical support staff for 1 doctor, while there is less than half of a teaching support staff for every teacher. Next slide, please. So this recommendation led to the launch of the Education Workforce Initiative and our Transforming the Education Workforce report. This put forward 3 interacting, iterative, adaptable visions for a systemic approach to the education workforce, able to address learning, equity, and inclusion. The visions put forward include a strengthened education workforce through incremental change to address immediate challenges around recruitment, preparation, development, and management. The second vision was a shift to a more collaborative education workforce through developing learning teams. And the final vision is a more radical paradigm shifting vision about transforming education systems into learning systems. And today we'll focus on learning teams. But just to say that creating learning teams was also an action included in the Save Our Future white paper, which was written this summer and consulted hundreds of organisations on evidence and actions to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. And we're now really keen to work with countries and other partners to make that action a reality. Next slide, please. So why create learning teams? Well, Carol has already talked about this a lot at the beginning, but just really to touch on a couple of points. So teachers are in short supply and often don't receive the educational support they need to be effective in their jobs. And as Carol said, workforce design is still based on a 1 teacher to 1 class model that was created for standardization rather than personalization. Some of the best systems have started to innovate and adapt beyond this model. And now the pandemic with wider global trends are changing the understanding of what teaching and learning can look like, which provides an opportunity for new approaches. Classroom teachers, as Carol says, are often tasked with understanding and meeting extremely diverse needs, such as those of first-generation learners, those who speak multiple languages, have had interrupted education and special needs, often with training that is very generic, large class sizes and little support. The COVID-19 crisis has affected millions of teachers and students worldwide, leading to huge predicted learning losses, but it has shown that teachers can no longer work alone. The case studies you will hear from today show that during COVID-19, where there were forms of learning teams in place, learning was able to continue, demonstrating that learning disruption is preventable if different roles within and outside school can work together as a team. Next slide, please. So what is a learning team approach? As Lisbeth said, this is about shifting the class design from the teacher at the centre surrounded by students to a learning team design where the learner is at the centre, supported by a collaborative team of professionals. These teams of professionals would leverage a variety of expertise and experience to collectively focus on improving the learning and inclusion of all students, and at the same time, they would be able to continually learn themselves. This means that the diverse needs of students can be met, but it also means that teachers can focus on teaching and have greater support. Using a learning teams approach is about investing in the social capital as well as the human capital of the workforce. Next slide. So this concept is based on a growing body of evidence that shows how different roles working together can together improve teaching, learning and inclusion. The evidence suggests that there are improved learning outcomes when teaching assistants and learning support staff with training support individual pupils or small groups using a specified approach. And you will hear shortly about the Learning Assistant Programme led by GATE in Sierra Leone. Specialist and complementary support roles can support inclusion in mainstream classrooms. For example, the Sightsavers itinerant specialist teacher programme in Uganda. Professionals from other sectors, such as community health workers, can promote inclusion, target the most marginalised, and support on a broader range of education outcomes, like student health and welfare and well-being. An Education Development Trust will shortly speak about their work in this area. Volunteers from the local community, national service programmes, parents and families can support in areas such as foundational learning, mother tongue instruction, connecting students to schools and supporting blended models of learning. And you will hear from Pratham on this soon. Members of the local community can also supplement lessons with applied and project-based learning, helping connect what students learn in theory in school to real-world issues and supporting the transition to work. For example, the work of Educate in Uganda and Injaz in Jordan. Next slide, please. But learning teams are not about creating a significantly more expensive workforce. They're about optimizing existing skills and expertise where possible across a team. For example, families and members of the community have a lot to offer to support children's education. The evidence around family engagement in education, albeit mainly from the US, shows that parents and caregivers can be an important ingredient in children's achievement in school. And emerging insights from the pandemic have identified parents and communities as a key resource for school leaders all over the world, providing additional expertise, knowledge, and local capacity to respond to COVID-19. And teaching at the right level programs led by community volunteers and NGO staff have consistently led to gain in learning outcomes. Learning teams can also help harness the expertise of higher performing teachers and those with specialist skills. Pairing more effective or specialist teachers with least experienced teachers, as Carol mentioned earlier, means students benefit both from the expertise of the most capable teachers, but also the support of other adults. And including trainee teachers as part of a learning team can provide better initial education through more practice and enable them to support teaching and learning. Innovative approaches to sharing shortage subject expertise across schools are also taking place. Task shifting is another way that we can help realign roles towards learning and inclusion. For example, teachers' instructional time can be increased and protected if they have support roles to undertake some of the preparation or administrative tasks. And task shifting can also help facilitate some more innovative and personalised learning configurations that better respond to individual needs. Next slide, please. But to help to make learning teams happen, strong instructional leadership is absolutely vital. And evidence shows that at the moment, school leaders spend too much time doing administration and not enough supporting teachers to teach. A greater focus on instructional leadership can be enabled by task shifting some of the administrative tasks and by using technology. A UNESCO review concluded that effective school leadership that provides instructional guidance and fosters continuous improvement is the key to successful large-scale and sustainable education reform. To do this, leaders need to transform school sites, into sites of professional development and focus on data-driven school improvement. And learning teams can help facilitate this through peer collaboration, mentoring, and coaching, which all have proven to positively impact learning outcomes. Next slide, please. So learning teams are underpinned by collaboration. A systematic review of teacher collaboration concluded, when teachers collaborate, the performance of students progress, schools undergo cultural changes, are more innovative, But on a personal level, teachers seem to benefit as well. A team approach can also help establish an environment of trust and support. But as Carol has mentioned, system-wide structures and practices will need to change to create learning teams. Initial teacher education needs to be reformed to equip teachers and trainees to work in learning teams. Training, professional development, and eventually qualifications will be needed for new roles so that they can be recognised in their own right. Goals will need to be aligned across systems and teams within the system. And the workforce needs to be engaged in all of this so that they can take part in helping design what learning team works best in their context. Next slide, please. So to summarise, evidence suggests that learning team approaches can lead to more effective and personalised teaching and learning, greater access to specialist expertise, a more inclusive and holistic approach to help address student welfare and well-being, more on-the-job learning and support and better motivation, and also to build more resilient systems. Last slide, please. So why now? Well, I think you've heard from Lisbeth, Carol and Lucy that the pandemic actually has provided a brilliant opportunity to talk about learning themes and how actually they can be embedded and be more resourced within education systems. The approaches we'll hear from today and the evidence we've shared mainly come from approaches that have been designed as targeted innovations. But during the crisis response, we've seen how, as Lucy has said, these forms of learning teams have sprung up everywhere and how teachers are collaborating with other members of the community, parents and families, so no child is left behind. During the last year, systems have been disruptive and mindsets are shifting about what education design and delivery can and must look like. Now is the time to be intentional about working in teams and considering how best to integrate this learning team approach into education systems so they can improve education outcomes for all and be more resilient. Other sectors, as Lisbeth said, such as health and early childhood, have systematized team-based approaches for better cost effectiveness, delivery and outcomes. So why not in education?